Welcome to our Sparkfest 2020 event. I want to thank our Firestarter Festival colleagues, Karen and Verena, for inviting us along. We had an amazing event back in January, and it's lived long in our memories despite everything else that's been happening over the last 6 months or so. So just to introduce myself, I'm Kate Smith and I lead a unit within the Early Learning and Childcare Directorate within Scottish Government. And part of the remit of our unit is to develop a new policy around school-age childcare. And that is the policy area that the work we did as part of the Firestarter Festival was focused around. So with me today, I've got Eilidh Henry, who is Policy Manager for School-Age Childcare, and Eilidh was really heavily involved in the work around the event, and I might ask her to help me out at points throughout this as my memory fails me. And also we have really pleased to have with us Gavin Crichton, who is Artistic Director at Active Inquiry. And Active Inquiry are an arts and theatre company based in Leith in Edinburgh, and we've been really lucky to work collaboratively with Active Inquiry as we develop our school-age childcare policy, and we'll come on to how that was really the focus for the event that we ran in January. And Gavin will talk to you a little bit later in the session. We've got quite a lot to get through in 45 minutes, so I'm going to try and not speak too much and in too much detail about why we decided to do the event, but to show you a little bit about what the event looked like and to focus on what we got from it. So I'm going to ask Verena to play a short video which captures, we were really lucky to use an amazing filmmaker called Ray Bird, who works closely with Active Inquiry to capture some of the event, and it was really worthwhile doing that. So that's a tip for if you do something like this in the future, that it's great to have this footage and capture the event as it happened, so that we can share that and use it more widely after the event. Thanks, Verena.
Thank you, Kate.
So forum theatre is kind of a type of theatre that was developed in South America, and it's a bit different from traditional theatre in that the audience can interact with the play. So the normal way forum theatre works is we have a warm-up with the audience, then we show the play, and then we ask the audience about the play. Hopefully there'll be something in there that they didn't enjoy. It kind of shows a character that's defeated by the end. Then we ask the audience, well, what could that character try differently? And we replay the play a second time, but this time we say to the audience, anytime you think a character could try or say something differently, shout stop, and you can come up onto the stage, replace that character and try something differently. The idea isn't about to find the perfect solution, but it's just to try things, a space to try things out, and then go back to the audience and say, well, what worked with that? Where was there any progress in that? What didn't work? What else could we try to understand the situation a little bit better?
I enjoyed the forum theatre today. You can talk about things and give out bits of paper about what's, about anything, but to see it done in a play or acting is, I think, is the best way to, because people there are seeing it and they can see it. It's like real. I think it's great. You get a feel of lots of people's opinions and you get a good discussion of whatever they're talking about.
I've never really witnessed anything like this before. I thought it was such a good tool in order to engage with the wider community, and especially from a government point of view, to actually get the communities and the people's opinion on very urgent topics. Being introduced to a very specific character who tells you a story that sparks your thinking and your imagination. I think this forum of theatre very much includes everyone, and it does create a very different form of discussion that otherwise would not have been possible.
I'm really inspired by the way that it's been used specifically to intervene and influence in policy in different countries. So in New York, for example, recently, it's been used to actually kind of have an influence on policy there. There are examples in other places in the world. So I think moving forward, we're interested in rather how it might influence policy a bit more directly than just kind of hoping that it does. So in a way, that's why we've got involved with the Scottish Government here and why this felt like a really appropriate way of doing our work, because there is a policy that's being developed on out-of-school childcare, and they're wanting to hear from people, and they're wanting to use forum theatre as a different way of doing that than just sitting around and doing focus groups. In that way, we really hope that we'll bring in kind of a bit more of a democracy, if you like, to influencing policy.
Thanks, Verena. Thank you. Hopefully that ran okay for people. It was looking a little bit stilted on my feed, but the actual film is a lot smoother than that. If you were experiencing a bit of that stilted as well, I'll give you a little bit of background on our school-age childcare policy, just to set a wee bit of context. So, school-age childcare is a new policy focus for Scottish Government. And so essentially our team at the time were starting with a blank sheet of paper. So we were thinking about what more Scottish Government could do to support children and families in Scotland to access more affordable and accessible school-age childcare. So we know that many families rely on childcare after school and in the holidays to enable them to work, and even more families face challenges in accessing that childcare. And we know that if families can access high quality, flexible, affordable school-age childcare, then it plays a really important role in addressing economic, social exclusion, and that these services can give parents time to access opportunities to work, to study or train. And we also know that research shows that school-age childcare can provide improved outcomes for children as well as for the parents and families as well. And there was a really important need for us to engage around this new policy area. There was some research that had been done and some evidence base that we could look at, but we had really very little insight into people's views on school-age childcare. So over the past 2 years, we've made it a priority to engage with stakeholders to find out the way that it currently works and ways that it could improve with future investment. So we really wanted the policy that we delivered to be very focused on people's experiences, because we're policymakers, but we didn't have that knowledge and understanding of the challenges and barriers that people faced, and what some of the unique circumstances were that people found themselves in either being able or unable to access school-age childcare. So I'll talk a bit about our work with Active Inquiry and our Firestarter Festival event, which was a key part of our stakeholder engagement and our policy development. So we wanted to think carefully and creatively about how best to engage with different stakeholder groups. We ran workshops with staff working in school-age childcare settings. We ran some small focus groups with childminders and with parents from different areas across the country. And while these were a good starting point, we knew that asking questions and inviting discussion wasn't necessarily the best way to engage people and to get to everyone that we wanted to hear from. So we did quite formal things like surveys, but we know that often, particularly from Scottish Government, there will be a certain type of person that will respond to a survey or a consultation, and we wanted to do something that was more inclusive. And we particularly also wanted to speak to children as part of that engagement. So a colleague introduced us to Gavin from Active Inquiry, and when we met with Gavin, we were really inspired to think about a different way. Gavin introduced us to forum theatre, and we were, like I say, inspired to use that as a different way of accessing people and connecting people with the policy development process, which we thought was really important. So Gavin's here today, and I'm going to hand over to Gavin at this point to give you a much better explanation of what forum theatre is and how he got involved in the work that we were doing. Thanks, Gavin.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kate, and thanks everyone for inviting me here today. So I think I've got kind of 5 minutes to chat about forums, so I will try and keep it brief, just to give a general background on it. You've seen a little bit in the film there. It was developed actually in Brazil, in South America, Forum Theatre, by a Brazilian director called Augusto Boal, and it's part of a much wider kind of branch of theatre that I won't go into now. But the whole idea of forum theatre is that it's not finished, is that unlike traditional theatre, you're not going to watch it and then go away. The idea is that the audience can get much more involved, can participate much more in what happens. It's often been described as a kind of theatrical game, you know, and I do like to try and keep that idea that we're playing, you know. We might be talking about serious topics, but we're playing. It's based on the educational philosophy of a great South American, Brazilian as well, educationalist called Paulo Freire. So it's, you know, a lot of that philosophy is at its heart, the idea that knowledge is something that we build together through dialogue, rather than something that's kind of passed on from one person to another. So that's kind of what it's all about. And a typical piece of forum theatre will have a main character, a protagonist, who we hopefully will get on board with at the start, who wants something, and by the end of the play, they've been defeated in lots of tries to get that, and they end up completely not wanting it anymore, doing something different. And the idea is that then we replay the play a second time, but this time the audience can stop the play, can replace that character and try things differently and see what might happen. And as I said in the video, it's not about finding the solution, right? This isn't about training the right way of doing things. It's about opening things up, opening a dialogue, understanding what's going on a little bit better. Because I think there's a danger sometimes in forum that it can be about how an individual can negotiate a system. But actually what should happen in forum theatre is that these problems that this character comes up against are not kind of flukes or unusual. In fact, Boal used to say these conflicts would be necessary because that's the system that we're living in. So it's kind of to look at a specific story, that's the thing, but that's not where we want to stay. We want to move out and explore kind of wider structures, which is why I think in terms of policy, it's really useful. We can look at someone's story, but then we can think about what does that tell us about the wider rules that are governing this space, and how we might be able to change those. So that's kind of what we want to do in forum. We want to start at the micro, and we want to use it to illuminate and start discussing the kind of the macro. I think there's lots of things I can talk about, but I think a couple of useful things about using theatre in this way. One is to explore the idea of the verb to act, because obviously there is the idea of acting on the stage. There is the idea of that we all act in a particular role in the structures that were given us in society. Yeah, and I think that's always a very interesting one, like whatever your job is, or whatever your gender is, or class, or we certainly have a kind of way of acting in that. And that is something that's taught because of the society that we live in. So what forum does is it starts to explore that, you know, how are we acting in those roles, or being asked to act in those roles. And then finally, there's the idea of to act as about taking action. So what can we learn from doing something in a piece of forum theatre that can enable us to learn something about what we can do outside of the theatre space? Yeah, so it's not just about having a nice discussion and then seeing what might happen next. And I think that in terms of policy and thinking about policy, it can be really useful in terms of looking at that situation that's happening and really exploring, okay, what is going on here? What are the rules in this place? Maybe even hidden rules in this space that are affecting this, that we need to start to challenge and think about. And I quite like thinking about policy as almost the gap between what an individual can do to change that situation to where it needs to be fair or just, and yeah, what an individual can do and what else needs to happen. And that bit about what else needs to happen is the kind of policy, really. So that I'm going quite quickly here, but that's kind of what I believe it can do. And I think there's some good examples around the world. I mentioned in the video there about New York, Theatre of the Oppressed New York, that are really kind of developing this at the moment and have used it actually to pass some policies in New York City. So there's some really interesting ways that it's being used. I think some other things that are very interesting globally at the moment I could mention is a real feminist angle taking off in Theatre of the Oppressed, which is the wider body of work that Forum Theatre belongs to. There's a great international network now called the Madalena Network. And again, this has come as a real thought about actually the theatre of the oppressed in its original Portuguese, Teatro do Oprimido, puts the oppressed as in the masculine. Whereas actually there's an interesting kind of thing now in the world about saying Teatro das Oprimidas, to put it in the feminine. What does it mean to actually think about gender oppression? So there's a really interesting network going on in the world about that. There's lots of other things happening here. I think the important thing, I'll end now, but for me the important thing to say about Forum Theatre is it's not just a tool for engagement or a technique or something like that. It comes from a wide political position to say there is injustice which we need to challenge. We are showing an injustice on the stage and we're thinking about how we can encourage dialogue to challenge this injustice in some way. So it goes beyond kind of engagement or even, what's the phrase, speaking truth to power, things like that happen that I think are important things to do, but it actually likes to think about where's injustice, where's this power imbalance, and how can we start to challenge some of these structures. So yeah, and that was a bit of a whistle stop tour, and I'm happy to do a little bit more talking about Forum Theatre in the questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Gavin. And I think you can probably understand from Gavin's description there of Forum Theatre how when we first met Gavin, we were really inspired to use this as a tool to really bring our policy development process to life. So for us, Forum Theatre really seemed like an exciting way to engage people in the challenges of accessing school-age childcare, which might seem like quite a bland or quite small part of policy across Scottish Government. But when we started with that blank piece of paper and we started mapping out all of the interconnections that happen round about someone trying to access childcare for their school-age children, then those interconnections highlighted really big policy areas that are brought in. So employment, finance, economy, and then thinking about some of the more personal things, parenting, stress, children's behaviour, and the experiences that people are challenged by every day, and how those experiences are different for particular types of families, and how that's different depending on your background, on where you live, on the type of job that you have or don't have, and why that is. So we needed to develop the play, and we gathered information from parents through our focus groups and shared these findings with Active Inquiry, who did an amazing job of taking quite a small amount of information, but also using their wider understanding and creating this play, The Balancing Act, which depicted the challenges that a single mum, Becky, faced when her son started school and she took that opportunity to go and look for a job.
So reflecting on that part of the process, I think if we'd had a bit more time, it would have been even better for Active Inquiry to deliver workshops that would have informed that development of the play. We didn't have the luxury of that time, but they did an amazing job with putting the play together. So, so if we move on to thinking about the performance, the short play runs for about 10 minutes and is performed in front of the audience in situ. And after the initial running of the play starts again. And this time the audience are invited to change how the story develops by changing the actions of the characters and thinking about how the systems and policies around those characters could work differently. So the Firestarter Festival was the third time that the Balancing Act had been performed. We previously shared it with a group of single mums in Glasgow and to policy makers and also the Minister for Children and Young People, Marie Todd, at a performance in Scottish Government. And actually it was maybe the fourth time actually, because we'd also done a public performance out of the blue in Leith. And on each occasion the play had a really powerful impact on the different audiences that it was delivered to, and at each event new ideas were generated and different theories and were explored. The play acted as a starting point for discussions and helped audience to consider ideas in the round, acknowledging the way that the different policies interact with each other or don't in the real world, and how that brings challenges for the characters. And it was really amazing to watch how people engaged with it, and a real eye-opener, I think, for us as policymakers, and brought things to our minds that we hadn't thought of before, and I believe that we wouldn't have thought of if we hadn't chosen to do it, to share our policy development in this way with people. So that's a really important point to take away, is that I feel that through these means we have it has opened our eyes to some of the challenges and some areas that we really wouldn't have thought of without this process. So and then just a bit about what we did afterwards was we took the ideas and views shared through the Forum Theatre and we fed them into our policy development, and the insights that we've gained through these events have enhanced our understanding and raised those helpful, challenging questions for us as policy makers. So at the moment we are putting together a final strategic framework on school-age childcare over the next few months, and like I say, all of the information that we've gathered through this process is informing that. So a little bit about what we've learned. We've learned that people have different perspectives and ideas, and that these can be articulated through a creative process just as effectively, and in some cases more so than by traditional means like a survey or an interview that we've spoken about before. And we know that engaging in a range of ways is important. So not everyone communicates in the same way or thinks about policy in an abstract way that I think sometimes we as policy makers rely on that because that's our safe space. And we have discovered that Forum Theatre can make it real. It's brought our policy to life, and it shows how policies affect people's experiences in life as well. So as I mentioned earlier, if we'd had a bit more time, it would have been better to maybe have parents involved through workshopping with Active Inquiry and devising the play. But I don't think that takes away from the final product that we had. And in delivering, we know how closely people felt to that play because of the emotions that were expressed when we delivered the play to groups of parents and to members of the public. People saw themselves in Becky and were able to think through all of the steps and the connected policy challenges that there are in her struggle with access in childcare. So a little bit about the event and what we might have changed about the event. as part of the delivery through the Firestarter Festival. We had a great audience, really engaged. In fact, I recognise a couple of faces at the session today that were there at the event itself. Yeah, so we had a wide range of people in the audience there, and we would have liked more time. I think, particularly for the forum theatre side of it, we needed to cut that a little bit short at the end. And I guess we learned from the different performances of the play that it takes people a little bit of time to warm up to forum theatre, and so you do need to allow time for that to happen properly. And we didn't really have the luxury of that. So I think if we're summing up and allowing a little bit of time for questions at the end, we had a really positive experience, both working with Active Inquiry and also in delivering that session as part of the Firestarter Festival. We would really encourage colleagues to consider forum theatre as a tool within policy development, and a useful tool in stakeholder engagement. It's a great way to engage people. And I think what it did was make quite a dry policy topic something that really got to the heart of what why this policy is important to people's lives. And it gives people a voice that they, in many of the circumstances that we used it, people wouldn't ordinarily have been looking for to be engaged in an out of school care policy. So it gave people a voice who probably wouldn't engage through traditional means. And also it's a really useful tool, and we've captured the performance. We can show it at different places. I was actually supposed to be in America talking about the work that we've done on developing this policy just when COVID hit, and unfortunately wasn't able to go and do that. But we've had interest from all over in the work that we've done around using this method to help support our policy development process. So it creates a lot of buzz and energy around a policy, and that's been really fantastic for us because it's helped bring it to life. And I think another important thing to do, and it's not to flatter Gavin just because he's here, but it's really important that you do this with skilled people who know what they're doing and are able to do that in a very professional way. It can, I think, maybe sound, without you having seen the whole thing, it could maybe sound like quite an intimidating process, and it's not at all, because Gavin and his team are so skilled at being able to ensure that that people feel comfortable, people feel welcome, and people feel engaged in the process. I think that's probably all I need to say about the event, Verena, but really happy to take questions. And Eilidh, just to check whether, Eilidh did a lot of prep for me and for putting this session out, so just to make sure that I haven't missed it.
I think, Kate, you're not on mute, but
oh, sorry, my mic just dropped. Not professional.
There's a lot of chat going on in the chat box, actually. I'm just losing track of the questions coming in, but if there's any questions, please also feel free to speak up if you prefer to address one of the team directly. Please do so. Yeah,
I'm on my phone, so I can't see the chat without flicking backwards and forwards. So yeah, it would be good if people just
There was an interesting comment made by Matthew saying, why is there an end point? Could policy not be reimagined as a living dialogue between citizen and state?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And so one of the things that we've made a commitment to do, partly because of the work that we've done with using forum theatre, is to establish a people's panel who will continue to work with us as we develop the school-age childcare policy. So that doesn't stop when the framework's published. That would be a group of people, and it can be an ever-evolving group of people. So when I say a people's panel, we don't mean a panel of 10 people. We mean groups of people who will continue to keep us right and steer this policy as we develop it.
I was just going to come in there. There was a couple of questions from Marie. I don't know whether they've been answered since you first asked them, which was a while ago, but if you want to ask anything you feel that's not been covered, Marie.
Yeah, it's just when Gavin was talking about us acting in roles that society asks us to do, I suppose in this exercise what you maybe want people to do is be a bit more authentic. So I don't know if how did you manage to get the citizens to bring their authentic self rather than act a role that might have been expected of them?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and yeah, it's one of those things that is slightly tricky sometimes to look at. But the way I suppose we explore it both in the rehearsal process for a piece of forum theatre and in the performance is about trying to show on stage what it is, like what becomes a kind of systematic way of behaving in a certain situation rather than true. And we try to show that up a little bit. So, and the great thing about using theatre is, of course, you can use different ways. You can use different aesthetics. You don't have to stick to trying to be kind of too naturalistic. So there are different things you can use to show this. So what you're doing the whole time is you're problematizing what might seem like normal. You're problematizing this to an audience. You're making them look at it differently. And then in that way, they can start to explore and think about, okay, what is this kind of system or this way that we are acting, either as ourselves in a role or a particular kind of system that's designed, and how can we maybe enter that differently? How can we maybe disrupt that differently? How does that actually feed into injustice and oppression happening? And so in that's kind of the way you do it in forum theatre, is that you're enabling people to look at things with kind of fresh eyes and be able to challenge it from that point of view, rather than kind of asking them to necessarily bring their authentic self. But I think there's something also about the way you set up forum theatre. So if you've got kind of you've got an audience coming in already, we all have an expectation of how to act as an audience, right? We should sit in the dark and be quiet and be appreciative and clap at the end. So you're immediately in forum theatre, you're asking people to come in, you're normally speaking to them as the actors, you start off with a warm-up game, you're asking them to speak to people next to each other, to shout out, to even come on the stage before you even started. So you're already starting to disrupt what people are expecting, and in that way you're hoping that you're starting to kind of break down some of that mechanization.
Well, great.
Really helpful. The other thing I asked I suppose Kate might be able to share with us, what do you think you learned, Kate, that you wouldn't have learned if you hadn't used forum theatre as a way of influencing policy?
I think we learned a lot about people's real lives and the challenges that they face. So, for example, when we used forum theatre in the situation in Glasgow with the single mums, we learned a huge amount about how similar Becky's story in the forum theatre piece was to their lives, but that they could change her situation slightly to reflect what some of the challenges were that they might have come across. Now we know, because we did engagement sessions without the Forum Theatre, and we did ones with, that people opened up in a different way. So they told us more about their situation, and they told us more about the potential solutions to that situation. So they put themselves in Becky's shoes, because it's their lives, and that was easy for them to do, and they told us what would make that better for them. So the challenges that Becky were facing, they were able to show, to act, to tell us what would improve that situation. And if we'd asked them that question, and we did in rooms of different parents or groups, they find it really hard to step out of the situation that they're in, and think about how things can be different, because for a lot of people who face barriers and challenges, that's a hard thing to do, to step out of their current situation, and to speak to Scottish Government about how we could make things better, or what actions we could take to make things better. So it put people in a different position, and they certainly felt able to engage openly. Maybe a slight detachment from it being a Scottish Government thing as well. So yeah, I think that's the difference it made.
I think just building on that a wee bit, it sort of opened up people to talking about their own feelings and experiences, and the stress that they have in their lives and the difficulties they face, in a way that people didn't really open up about as easily. I think especially when you're talking about a really sensitive personal subject such as parenting, people might not be forthcoming to say, actually, I find this really difficult and it affects the relationship with my child. Whereas when you had the play as a starting point for conversation, it was much easier for people to share their own experiences, whether that was similar to the play or different, but it really opened up conversations in a way we didn't get in our other work with people.
Yeah. We've got, that's great, thank you. I mean, there's just so many good questions coming in. It's like you've released some real curiosity here. So, and that's the job, isn't it? But a similar kind of question, I think Hannah and Caroline are asking a similar kind of thing about, could Kate say something about how she got colleagues who might be more familiar with different forms of data evidence to engage? That's the kind of more traditional ways that we collate these. And you may have answered that. I'm particularly thinking maybe Scottish Government colleagues. Was this a process? Did it feel like a leap of faith, or were colleagues engaged from the start? So maybe or Kate. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. It was definitely something we hadn't done before. So in that sense, for us, it was a leap of faith. I think that we always felt really confident that it would work after our initial discussions with Gavin. Yeah, we were really confident that it would work. We knew that this was a policy area. And because we were developing a new policy, we had that opportunity to influence and to really take on board people's views in order to make sure that we are developing policy from the bottom up. So thinking about the user experience and what they need, rather than thinking about what's possible and then trying to retrofit that into people's lives. So I think it was a great opportunity and the right stage in policy development to do this work. I think there was lots of skeptics, and I think people thought we were a bit nuts at various points, but particularly following the Scottish Government performance that we did, we got loads of positive engagement from different policy areas around about Scottish Government, just saying that it's made them think about different ways that they can engage, and maybe not forum theatres, maybe not always the way that can happen. And it's worth saying just a little bit about what we did with children as well, using active inquiry. So we did some engagement with children which also used theatre to create this scenario where they were on an island where there was no holidays and no time outside of school during holidays, and that allowed children to create this to show us what's important about holidays, why they need holidays, and they had to convince this Scottish Government official, who was Gavin, Mr. Wilson, that they needed holidays and why they needed them. So in a different way, we used theatre to draw out these views from children, and that was also really successful. And again, engaging with children can be a really difficult thing to do for Scottish Government, or to do it effectively, and that was another way that we used theatre, not forum theatre, but theatre in a different way to engage children's views.
Thanks, Kate. I suppose one of the things that we've kind of touched on before is around leadership within. Because I think sometimes we work in government, it can feel as if people are risk averse. That's not really true, but it can feel a little bit that. And so doing something different, I think, is quite challenging there. Did you feel supported to take that risk to do something different?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think that at both Deputy Director and Director level, within our Directorate, we have really great support for thinking about alternative ways of doing it. And I think sometimes in Scottish Government we can do things in an alternative way, just to do things in a different way, and I think that is an important consideration. We didn't do this just to do something different. We did it because we knew that it would deliver results and would aid our policy development process. So from a selfish point of view, we did it to make our work better, but it was really it really delivered benefits the way that we did it. So that is important, that there's a marriage between the way that we did it and what we wanted to get from that work as well. So it wasn't different for different sake. It was different because it would deliver better results.
I mean, there have been loads and loads in the chat, and we can maybe send that to you, Kate, because you can't see it. So we can download and send you some of the questions and some of the thoughts there. But certainly, I've been to a few forum theatre things. I think are absolutely amazing, and there's a lot of people here that have been involved. I think Pete was saying, and Bill, they've both been part of forum theatre there, and I think that it is something to experience. And I think you can't really imagine the power of it and how involved you get. But I think also you see the ways that we stop ourselves and the limitations of our own thinking at times, and when you see how it plays out. So thank you for coming and sharing that. And we were just so impressed that we really hope to involve Active Inquiry in the launch or in some part of Firestarter next year. And I think Gavin was just telling me as we started that they are doing stuff online. So that would be great if we can continue that and do something during next year's Firestarter Festival, which will be the first week in February. And I anticipate it being online. There's nothing to tell me that we're not going to. We are going to do some walks and stuff like that. We're going to try and get people out of just being on there. So I don't know, we'll talk about that later, Gavin, but I think it'd be a fantastic contribution to the festival. It's things like that that really make you think and act differently. And I think you can feel so empowered to make a change. So it's great. And thank you so much for giving up your time to coming and presenting that. I imagine things are very busy for everybody. So I know that's really appreciate that, and and I hope that everybody else enjoyed it. Well, I know you've enjoyed it because there's been hundreds of comments there, people connecting into that. So thank you.
We'll have a look at all the questions and comments, but people should feel free to get in touch if they do want to chat through it. And we've obviously got the full play, and we've got some other material, particularly some films of the work that we did with children. Children's engagement with theatre, which are brilliant. They're really good to see. So really happy to share any of those if people are interested.
Okay, thanks so much to you guys for coming along. It's really great.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.